Edens, Darshan Kulkarni, KLF, joining you guys yet again because we know you want to hear from us on all of the late breaking things that are happening in the United States as it relates to our new presidential administration and many of the changes that they're making and how they impact our world. I know last Friday was a big day for a lot of us in that it was announced that NIH overhead, or known as indirect cost funding, FNA is also its official term, was going to be blanket capped at 15% in the United States. And you've seen a lot of conversation, backlash. We're already seeing lawsuits by academic medical centers, at least in democratic states, because they're very concerned about what this does to the funding and resources, and frankly, the ability for the United States to maintain our stance as a global leader in the research enterprise. So, with that, I'm very curious just before we dive in, and I know I really want to focus on the Association of American Medical Colleges and what they did yesterday. But what were your initial impressions on the 15% cap? Like, did that blow your socks off? Were you like, I mean, I figured something like this was coming? Like, where did you sit there?
So I've been negotiating these agreements since 2005 or so, plus or
Mhm.
minus. So it's been 20 years of watching these agreements grow. I remember early on seeing these agreements being negotiated I remember this whole discussion of, oh, it's an academic medical center. There's going to be a 15% top. And then it became 20. Then it became 30. And now we're at 50. And I have to go, look, from a pure commercial standpoint, is there waste that can be removed? Having said that, I have to also agree that a blanket 15% cap out of nowhere, not understanding why that 15% exists,
Right.
is also, lack of a better term, ignorant. Ignorant, not because as an insult, you literally don't know the reasons why that
Right.
15% cap exists.
I agree with you. I do think there's got to be a certain angle and amount of this that is a lack of understanding, or at least the response, the impetus of what this does. But and the other piece I think of it too is it strikes me as odd because I know this administration is very focused on economy, very focused on lowering prices, doing right by the average American. But if you're really economic administration, and I think they're focused there, you would understand that doing research in the middle of Boston is a very different price point than doing research in, say, like Oklahoma City. And that's also different than doing it at, say, UCSF. And these are all major academic medical centers, and they all do really good research. And they're all really critical to our enterprise, to our ecosystem. And so 15% is just not, you can't blanket any cost across the industry. The other piece I worry about too is we're about to have a supply chain potential complete upend based on the potential for tariffs and other pieces of what the administration's working on. Will that actually raise our research prices? In which case, 30% just became 40% overnight, right? Because just of a cost difference, not because the university's trying to actually make any more money off of you. They're just trying to subsidize and recoup. And then that plays into this cycle that we're getting into, and it's perceived as waste when it's really something we created.
I think that one of the things you and I have both done is we actually negotiated on behalf of large academic medical centers in the oncology space. And
Yes.
in both of our experiences, these research trials land up being loss leaders. They're
Yep.
not where these sites are making their money.
No.
They're losing money every single time they do it.
Investigator initiated trials and subsidized trials are always, always losing money. They're also always, always usually the only cause of hope for certain patients in very unique, rare diseases. Because large trials that are more based on, the blockbuster drug and the larger development and the larger impact, and also the larger fundraising event, opportunity there, they're not going to do that for a rare disease patient or for a nuanced oncology patient. But your provider at XYZ Academia Cancer Center knows they have three patients that would benefit from this because they're the specialist. Yesterday, we see the AAMC get involved. And this is what I was waiting for. I wanted to see would, the American Medical Association, are we going to see any of our professional bodies file suit? Are we even going to see global ones? You could even say, the World Medical Association. I mean, they're heavily involved when we talk about some of our ethical doctrine and things that we adhere to, like GCP. So when the Association of American Medical Colleges sued, they sued in the same court as the Democratic states, but they sued as a federal nationwide temporary restraining order, given their stance as a federal entity. And so, because of that, now as of today, we have a situation where there is actually a restraining order on enforcement of this across the entire United States. We don't have dates. We don't have a lot of information on, what happens next, but this is pretty quick moving. What do you think?
So I'm thinking a few different things. So I think number one, you talked about you were wondering, for example, would the World Medical Association sue? I don't think the Trump administration particularly cares about
No,
the World Medical
true.
Association. They're very, very US centric. So keeping that in mind, I think the AAMC has a greater chance of actually having an impact. Having said that, I think from a cost cutting perspective, you take an Elon Musk, who's currently having problems with getting everything through the FDA for the perspective of Neuralink. He sees this as slowing him down.
Right.
He sees technology as iterative, not realizing that patients are actually harmed, and there's a reason for the system we have today. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope he realizes that these are patients' lives that he's directly
Right.
affecting. You have situations where the Trump administration has come out and ignored court orders,
Yep.
especially in this space. So you have effectively a constitutional crisis. If you have three equal branches of government, which is the executive, the congressional, and the judiciary saying, no, you can't do this, and the other two are ignoring it, and not
Right.
even being done by the executive itself, but by a private actor within
Yep.
the executive. What do you do now?
For me, I know this administration, they have not been shy about America first, America first. They want
Right.
us to regain in their minds, our global superpowerness, right? So that's not a word. But but I wonder if there's a real understanding of, yes, is there waste in the system? You betcha. But if I had to guess, this 15% has been picked because that is about as much as a lot of your corporations that fund research will give. And a lot of your individuals in this administration have ties to some of those corporations. So let's make this link. The reason that folks in academic medical centers are upset is if you gave us more than 15%, then we wouldn't be asking for 60% from the NIH. But you, private corporation, you don't want to contribute to the public good and give us more money. But guess what? The NIH does because they care about the global good. Now you've kneecapped the NIH and we can't reallocate or resubsidize, certainly not as quick as the time you did not give us to enact this. But definitely there's going to be some things that just get cut for good, even once we do figure this all out. How does that keep us on the path for America first?
I want to tackle the question of if we can keep America great again with these cuts. So we'll come back
Yeah,
to that in a separate podcast.
sounds good. There's a lot to unpack.
Call, click, or email.